Today we're going to carve a spoon using inexpensive tools. Start to finish, this will probably be a two-part. First will be the axing of the spoon, and then we'll carve the rest of the spoon using just mora knives. All you're gonna need is a saw. You can get this mossy oak saw really cheap on Amazon. It comes with 3 blades. So that's our saw we're gonna use. And then this is a Prandy hatchet I got off of Amazon years ago. I think it was 50 or 60 bucks, but you don't even need this nice of a hatchet. You could just use a cheap Fisker's hatchet, whatever. Doesn't have to be a carving hatchet or a nice hatchet or anything. Just need a little hatchet that you can swing around. And that's pretty much all we need for tools for axing out the spoon blank, if you will. And you're gonna need some sort of chopping block, anvil, you know, a stump of some sort, a round. So that's what that is. You should be able to acquire that pretty easy. And then you're gonna want a pen or a marker. And then you're gonna need some hardwood. So let's go to the wood pile. So you're gonna want some hardwood. Straight grain. You can get your wood from an arborist or wherever. This is from a locust tree that a branch fell off of in my parking lot at work. And these were the 2 bigger logs. It's nothing huge, but I should be able to get a spoon out of this. So this is what I'm gonna use. I usually just store my wood like this in log form. Leave the bark on and everything. And this wood will stay green for a really long time. You'll notice the ends will start checking and cracking. And if this has been sitting around for a long time, what you're going to want to do is cut off 3 or 4 inches off of the end and just discard that completely, and then use what's left to carve your spoon out of, so your spoon doesn't dry and crack, because this wood is dried out and cracking and is no longer, you know, good material to carve a spoon out of. You can also paint the ends of these. If you want to store this, you could paint this end, cover it in glue or paint to help prevent it from drying out and cracking. But you can store logs like this for a really long time. So let's use it. So now that we've got our piece of wood, we want to determine how long our spoon is going to be. This wood doesn't seem like it's been cracking or dried out at all, so I'm going to risk it and not cut off the end like I suggested to you. I'm going to make this like a camp spoon size. I call it a camp spoon. It's for eating and cooking. It's like a all-in-one utensil. And I really liked the overall length and shape of it. My dog got to it though and chewed it up. So I keep it as a template. And usually I'll leave a little bit longer, a little bit more room at the top, and a tiny bit more room at the bottom. So I'll go ahead and mark that with the saw, and then we're just gonna cut that piece of wood off. So let me set this camera up. We are gonna saw our log. This wood is very dense. Let's get the snow off. It's cold on my hands. Watch out, Thea. The dogs love it when I saw logs. Nope, not for you. So I should be able to get at least 2 spoons out of this if I cut it down the middle. What I'll do, see that knot? We don't want a knot in our spoon. And we effectively have a... Hey, that's mine. So I'll probably try to split this with that knot in the middle. Thea, quit eating Dad's stuff. Go get your own stick. And I'll try to put this on the handle end of the spoon so we'll cut it out. Watch out, girls. Watch out. Good. And we've got 2 halves now. See that knot in there? That's pretty gnarly. That's what you don't want. But we're going to go ahead and continue on anyway. Didn't quite get it in the middle. I'll start with this smaller piece. So you can have your spoon facing the outside of this, and you'll get like a ring pattern in your spoon, and you'll get a different pattern if you make that the spoon bowl. So you can get different patterns for different orientations. You can even get a different one at a, like if you took a pizza slice out of this and went that direction, you'd get a different grain pattern. Essentially, I just want to flatten this out so I can draw my spoon on it here. I want that knot to be on the tail end, and you just kind of want to flatten out the bottom and flatten out the top and make a billet. Make sure you're doing this very safely. If this misses, you don't want it to hit you. Good enough for me. So I like to gradually slope downwards towards the spoon bowl. This will be the bowl. You want to keep everything square. Square as you can. Straight and square. Generally, you don't want to axe like this. That's where you hit your fingers, so turn your piece around. And then so I have my slope that I like to put in there. You don't have to do that, it's just what I like to do. Just a gentle downward slope, and this is where the bowl is going to be. And you can see this circular pattern. That's the pattern you're going to get in the grain from this orientation. You would get that from this side. So effectively, we need to figure out your proportions, your spoon bowl and handle proportion. How do you want it proportioned out? So I went and grabbed a pencil. I'm pretty bad at drawing things on good the first time. I'm also a little rusty. I haven't axed out a spoon in a long time, and am I no means an expert or professional or anything like that. So I'll show you something I like to do. You want to draw yourself a center line. So try to get that in the center. 2 center lines, and then I'm just going to connect them. Just so we have some sort of point of reference here. And then I like how this one is proportioned, so I'm going to use that. And we're going to put our crank in. You can put it in wherever you want, essentially. I usually do 1/3 of the bowl. So roughly 1/3 of this bowl. So I'm going to mark about 1/3 of where the bowl is. And I am going to draw a line, and that's going to be our saw line for the crank. Because that's what we're going to do next, is we're going to put crank into this. So you want your spoon to have some crank in it. You want it to have a little bit of bend at the spoon bowl. So when you're eating, your hand's not in your food, right? Something like this, a camp spoon, it's not as important. Like, you don't need crank on a cooking spoon or anything, and that's why they're easier to make. Something like this, I'll put a little bit in there. Like this has a slight bit of crank in it. If you can see that. Just a little bit. So that's where our crank is going to be. So the spoon bowl is going to go from here to here. Roughly about 1/3 of the length of the spoon bowl. So we're going to cut straight down. So this is going to dictate how much crank your spoon has, and you don't want this to be too much. And to kind of see where you're at, hold it flat, and then you can put your finger at the bottom of your cut and see if you're deeper on one side than the other. So hold the top flat, put your finger at the bottom of the cuts, and see that, make sure you're, cut in about the same depth on both sides. So that's what we got so far. You might have to redraw some of these lines. So I think this is like the tricky part for everybody. So what I'll do is cut down to that saw mark. Careful not to break through and cut there. break everything up into sections. Do one side, do this side, and then do the middle. So you're not trying to remove all of that wood at once. And what I'll do is I'll do a slow, gradual. All the way down to that saw mark. If I can actually hit it. The more you use the axe, the less you have to do later with your knife. I might have already messed this thing up. You want to do the same thing, go in that direction. So I hold it like this. You can use this stump as like a stopper, and you want to start here and work your way back. I'm using my arm to brace. Get it how you like. Can you see that? So now our crank's in. And you can see the shape of that spoon. I made this not square, and I made that really thin, but I think we'll be able to make it work. So at this point in time, I redraw. We'll draw the whole spoon. Now I said minimal tools. I like to use a bendy ruler. really don't have to use that. I'm just really bad at drawing straight lines, so that's what I'm going to do. Do a center line up here, center mark down here, and then just connect the dots. And don't be upset when your first spoon isn't perfect. There's no such thing as a perfect spoon. And quite honestly, you're probably going to have to carve about 100 of these before you make one you like. Just how it goes. And essentially, I got the bottom of that thing marked. I like to do a bunch of circles. And you know, I think I'm going to make this a big spoon. Why not? Well, I might not be able to. Let's do... Let's do that. You could use a compass if you're good at using compasses. I am not. See, I like this because I can line up the line on this circle with my center line. And then I'm actually going to change this, I think. Connect your circles. You could just freehand on a spoon. Nothing wrong with that. You don't even have to draw this. You could just freestyle the whole thing. And I usually draw it out thicker than I'm actually going to make it. And I'll even carve it out a little thicker with the axe and refine it all with the knife. You can make the handle fat, skinny. I usually like to make them gradually fatter as they go down. And you can always thin this out later when you're taking the knife to it. Just like anything, the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. Next, we're going to axe the sides to meet our lines. This stuff carves really nice. So that side, you're going to flip it. See that? And we'll repeat on the other side. all sorts of ways you can source wood. So you don't need a nice fancy hatchet to do this. Just need a sharp. Just need it to be sharp. You want it to. You want it. It'd be nice. It's nice to have your hatchet shaving sharp. I don't know if this one's quite. So what I'll do is I'll mark the back of the spoon where the crank is. Straight line coming across. And I'll make that line. So I'm going to axe from here, from that line down. It's not exact, right? But I'm just doing this to show you. So for my line here, this is going to go down, and all this is going to get removed. All that's going to be gone, and with the top, this is all going to be gone. So that's what we're going to do to the back of this. See the shape? Very spoon shaped. Can you see that? That line. So all this will be chopped off down here on the bottom. And the same with it over on the top. I just draw that line on the back to keep track where I'm at. Like I said earlier, one corner, and then do the middle. Now that I drew this line, it's probably going to mess me up. So I'm going to erase it. I like to eyeball this part, and if there's a line there, it's going to mess me up. A lot of traffic for New Year's Day out here in the middle of nowhere. Makes you wonder what everybody's doing. Okay. Remember what I said? When you're chopping this wood, you want to do a bunch of relief cuts. See all these little, they're all relief cuts. And then you want to come down and remove all those. And keep paying attention to the side, because that's your thickness. That's going to be your thickness of your spoon when you're done axing it out. Be the thickness of the blank. Like that. Both sides. Now this back part. Bunch of relief cuts. There's a lot of tutorials on YouTube on how to do this. I was gonna just axe out a couple spoons, so I figured I would just record it. Maybe it'll get posted. Maybe not. You're probably better off watching Zed Outdoors. If you don't know about Zed, I would check his out for green woodworking. Lots of tutorials from very talented people. So that's going to be, and like I said, the more you do with the axe, the less you have to do with the knife. So you can saw your notches down. Make 2 saw cuts. I started to kind of not like this method because it's pretty easy to saw too deep on the back here. And my cut isn't straight. So you got your 2 saw cuts here, and you axe down from up here to that saw cut, and you do the same from the top. This thing is sharp. Now this is where you want to be real careful. You don't want to axe too hard. I like to see if I can leave that notch there. Oop, and it's gone. Try to keep it as square as you can. Try not to wander on the side and cut too far on either side. I like to leave a little bit extra, like that, just in case it's not straight or something like that. I can fix it later. And then you do the same with the top part. The top part's tricky. That's why I have this stump like this. Can you see that? People make stumps with notches in them. Just for this reason. They put steps in them or whatever. I find that my tri-stump here works effectively the same way. This is one of the trickier parts. This top side here, along with the crank, are going to be your hardest. And you don't have to axe this top part out. You can just leave it like that and then take a knife to it right off the bat. I've ruined a lot of spoons right here. That's probably all I'll do. And I'll take the rest of it off with a knife. Yeah. Now the other way to do this is essentially the same thing, but with your axe. I would say the saw method is probably best for beginners. I'm trying to be really careful now, so I really don't want to ruin this. And we can tidy that up with a knife. Doesn't have to be perfect off of the chopping block. And then you want to do the top. Get these corners off. Just tilt it. Like so. Sharp axe really helps. This thing is crazy sharp. Like that. And now this side's round. You can effectively tilt it. Do the same thing over here. Try very hard not to screw up at this point. If you're worried you're going to screw it up right here, just stop and use a knife. Typically you don't want to do chopping in this direction, so you can set it down flat and use your axe like a lever and cut off the top like this. And then usually I thin out the tip a little bit. I'll hit the sides a little bit. And just kind of round off that just a little bit. So it doesn't have to be perfect. First time off of the axe, you can fix a lot of this with a knife, no problem. And make sure you put this thing in a Ziploc baggie or a bucket of water and keep it sealed up nice and tight until you finish it. You don't want this to dry out. You want it to stay green until you're done. All right. So that's part one. Part one, carving spoon. Nothing fancy. We used a cheap handy Amazon hatchet and a mossy oak saw and a pencil. And a ruler and yeah, didn't even need to use that stuff, but there you have it. Alright, so part two's coming up, and we're going to carve this spoon with a Mora 106 and a Mora hook knife. If you're worried you're going to screw it up right here, just stop and use a knife. Typically you don't want to do chopping in this direction, so you can set it down flat and use your axe like a lever and cut off the top like this. And then usually I thin out the tip a little bit. I'll hit the sides a little bit. And just kind of round off that just a little bit. So it doesn't have to be perfect. First time off of the axe, you can fix a lot of this with a knife, no problem. And make sure you put this thing in a Ziploc baggie or a bucket of water and keep it sealed up nice and tight until you finish it. You don't want this to dry out. You want it to stay green until you're done. All right. So that's part one. part 1 carving spoon. There you have it. Alright, so part 2's coming up, and we're going to carve this spoon with a mora 106 and a mora hook knife.